Hi, and welcome to Serenity Now, a place for entrepreneurs to ask questions, learn, get connected, and be inspired. Join us as we talk about all things business and the search for the ever-elusive Serenity Now in both business and personal life.
Why should we listen to this podcast today?
I think sometimes that when you think and hear the word accelerator for entrepreneurs, whatever it is or whatever kind of specific fields they like to focus in, you know, as an entrepreneur myself and for lots of those that I work with, you kind of get a little scared and you think perhaps that's not for me. Or perhaps I'm just not ready for them as of yet. And I just don't know why I would actually talk to one or when I talk to one and what could kind of come out of it. What do they actually do? If you actually had any of those questions and more, this is why you want to listen to this episode today.
Ian, why should we listen to this podcast today?
Yeah, Ian should take a crack at it. I want to hear it.
Definitely, you'll get some insight a little bit on what an accelerator is, what it can do for you. But I also think that you'll get some insight on, you know, what it can mean to be an entrepreneur and to remember that it doesn't invalidate your entrepreneurial journey when you hit road bumps along the way, when you change your direction, when you pull the plug and do something new. And I actually think that's a really important thing for people to hear. So I hope they listen and hear it.
Welcome back to another episode of Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs, where we talk about all things inspiration, perhaps some serenity and business for entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Rita Kim, and today we have a special guest joining us on our fireside chat. So let me introduce to you who we have here today. We've got Serenity Sister Peggy today. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you.
And we've got Serenity Sister Candace. Welcome.
Hello, Rita.
Hey. And now on to our special guest. It's going to be all about our guest today. This is Ian Bergman. Welcome.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
Great. So let me see if I can get this right for you. So I stole this off LinkedIn. So I didn't even ask him if I could say this, but I'm going to try it now. Ian Bergman's got this really great background, but he says he's a friend to startups. He's a partner at Alchemist Accelerator. He's a corporate innovation agitator, and he's a general purpose nerd. I really like the last one because I think we can all relate to that. But I think from my experience with Ian, and I met him about a year ago now, I think he's just a champion of innovation, of entrepreneurs, and just the entire ecosystem. So I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome, Ian, again.
No, seriously, thank you so much. I'm really excited. I love a conversation about entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship, the mission they're on, the heroes they are. It's one of my favorite things. And getting to nerd out while we're doing it sounds good to me.
Awesome. So before we dive into the discussion, can you just share a little bit about your background? And maybe you can, help us understand or unpack some of those words that I used earlier to describe you. But yeah, it's nice to know who's on stage today.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try and keep it brief, but I really do consider myself a little bit of a quote unquote general purpose nerd. I'm curious. I like to dig into stuff, but then I move on and do the next thing. So I've dabbled in a lot in my career. I'm one of those people who declared, I think, 7 majors or concentrations in university as I sort of figured out what I was actually going to do with my life. But the one thing that I think has been really consistent is a love of technology. I love tech. I love how it changes and impacts people. And so everything I've done in my career has been in some way centered around technology. I've started 2 companies. I co-founded a news site straight out of university with one of my classmates. And that company has succeeded, has done very well through no fault of my own, because I left after about a year deciding I wanted to eat more than ramen. But I've walked a bit of that founder journey. I've worked at a big company. I spent a number of years at Microsoft. Most recently there, I was working at Microsoft for Startups, running the engagement with startups around the world. And that's where a lot of that corporate innovation agitator came from, right? At Microsoft, we had this whole thesis like, there's all these big companies that are trying to stay relevant in a fast changing world. They're our customers. There's all these startups that want to sell to those companies. Maybe we can connect them. And it turns out that's harder than it sounds. But it's a good thesis, and it really leads right into what I'm doing now. I work with Alchemist Accelerator. We are a tech startup accelerator founded out of the Bay Area about 11 years ago now. And I'm glad to talk all about that. But, I get to work every day with founders that are building the future. I get to nerd out on the ideas and the things that they're building, and I try and help. And I think that's a lot of fun.
So you kind of took the words out of my mouth. So Alchemist Accelerator, maybe you can expand a little bit more on that. So what is it exactly? So you pair up like entrepreneurs and people. So explain.
Yeah, totally. Like, you're sort of like, do you pair people up? I mean, kind of. That's what an accelerator does. So let's sort of step back and talk about an accelerator and what I would call kind of the classic Silicon Valley sense, right? Along the lines of a Techstars, a Y Combinator. Like, what is an accelerator? Alchemist is an accelerator that works exclusively with enterprise tech startups. So we look for the best technical founders in the world who are building something that an enterprise is going to want to buy. It's usually software, but we have material science companies that we work with. We have kind of fundamental chemistry and deep tech that I barely understand. The commonality is that we are working with entrepreneurs and founders who have a deep right to succeed in solving the problem that they're tackling because of their legacy of experience. And they have a vision for, a future state of the world if they build the thing that they're trying to build. So to answer your question, like, what do we do? As an accelerator, it's in the word. An accelerator's job is to help an entrepreneur, to help a founder or a founding team move rapidly toward a destination that matters to them. And for us, that's usually a funding moment. Companies, startups come to us because they want to be ready to raise capital, significant amounts of capital, so that they can go build their vision. And the way we do that, I'm glad to get into the details, but in brief, there's a little bit of kind of curriculum and process that matters. There's steps that have been proven that companies should go through to develop conviction in what they're building, to translate that conviction to a story for potential investors and customers. But it's also about the people. We try and bring together an incredible community of exited founders that have built companies themselves and learned painful lessons along the way. Investors who are looking for the next big thing, buyers and customers who have problems they need to solve. We bring them together, and 1 + 1 + 1 = 10. We try and help the founder set themselves up for success. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You talked a lot about two things. You talked about growth, I would assume, comes from this accelerated process. And you talked about collaboration. Those two seem to be the underpinning themes, if you will, for these startups to gain that momentum, to have those connections to move forward. Can you go into that, just what that might look like a little bit more?
Let's talk about what you have to do if you are just starting out building a company, and specifically a company that you expect could be huge someday. It could be world-changing, world-influencing. You have to prove that the problem that you're trying to solve matters in the world, that you know who it matters to, you know how many of those people there are, that they form a market and that you understand them, right? You have to take that proof and you have to translate it into a sales pitch to get a few people to take a bet on you. They might become design partners. They might become first customers, whatever they might be. They're going to take a bet. And then you need to take what you learn from that first set of customers and translate it into a story that's going to help you raise capital to fund your growth, right?
Sounds like marketing to me.
It is. It's so much go to market. So that's so interesting. Our founders are mostly deeply technical founders, and they're founding teams. And that's important because there's a lot of value in being able to, learn from the customers you're talking to and then build immediately, iterate immediately yourself, try again as rapidly as possible. But you're exactly right. Deeply technical founders can often build a product and then forget along the way that they need to understand who needs it. They need to understand what is your go-to-market, what is your marketing. And that's actually a lot of what we do, is help with sales and go-to-marketing at an early stage to prove that this product has a right to exist.
With tech minds, they don't necessarily possess the same sort of mind as a marketer or the same sort of business attributes that someone who is a true entrepreneur might have. I work a lot with people in science, and I work a lot with people who almost need that team, as you describe it, the technical side of it as well as the business side of it. And then even some business people need a separate mind for marketing. It's not always one person possesses all those skills.
That's right. And when you find that one person who possesses all those skills, I want to meet them. We all have our own superpowers, but I think one of our insights, and this is filter criteria for the accelerator, because we're quite selective on who gets admitted through a university-like admissions process. One of the filter criteria is the makeup of the team. Is there a team, multiple people, and do they complement each other? Because no one person can do all of these things.
Agreed. So if we go into this just a little bit deeper, it's funny because when you made the comment is, I'm creating an idea that might change the world, some people could be scared right away. But if we break that down to what is one of the ideas that you've seen that has some sort of ability to get to that level of impact, I think I just want to be able to break it down so that it's accessible or somebody can relate to it a little bit versus what you said, the kind of big comment you said earlier. Yeah,
let's pick some examples of some great startups. So Manny might yell at me because I'm going to call him out as the founder here, but he's founder and CEO of a company called Flyhound, and they build drones and tools that can help first responders triangulate people that need rescue. And there's all kinds of other applications using, both complicated but also not so complicated technology. And all of a sudden you start to be in the situation where a first responder who is maybe venturing into an uncertain situation, fire, damage after an earthquake, et cetera, has much better information at hand without actually having to understand the tech behind them. We have founders that are working on new battery technology, energy storage, converting feedstock, for instance, to biofuel sources much more efficiently than has been done in the past. And of course, AI is everywhere. So, let's say you are a CPA at tax time. We're recording this in early April in North America tax time. It's busy. There's a lot of very painful, redundant, and mundane tasks that tech can help with. And we have people working on that. And there's a lot of CPAs in the world, and there's a lot of work to do to prepare taxes. And that becomes a big market.
But it just made me be able to kind of reach out and touch it and feel it and understand it a lot better than kind of the bigger statement that you made, because I was almost like, oh no, I could never apply to the accelerator because I don't have a world-changing idea. And how do you even do that? It might take me like my whole life to get to a world-changing idea.
World-changing idea is not something we actually even look for as people come in. I don't really know why I said that. That's just sort of the downstream implication.
Yeah, that's so true.
The entrepreneurs we work with, any entrepreneur, this, like very motivated, self-driven. There's something there pushing them.
Yeah, Peggy and I were talking about that today. There's something very special. That was the word we ended up using.
I think the word crazy came out of that conversation.
Thinking insanity kind of comes to mind.
I still like the word special. We'll go with it.
It all boils down to the same thing.
We're all nutters, but yeah, we think a little differently, I think. And you gotta have that slight difference to be able to be an entrepreneur. So I think that's great. And I think that sometimes when you think of, how can I create an idea or something that will make a difference, sometimes it's just the littlest things that you have no idea. It starts here and then it just has this great, incredible ripple effect that you actually may not even have been aware of to begin with. So the person creating that tech to be able to support someone to be able to understand the scene before they walk into, like, after earthquake or after, a situation. I mean, maybe somebody had a family member or they were involved in being in search and rescue. And so they just said, I just need to know this. But now I don't know the technology. Sorry, Manny, I'll go back and research it all now. But, it's not just for the first responders, the rest of the team, and how quickly we can get to someone and access them, get the right, equipment, tools, et cetera, to get them, extract them, and actually hopefully get them to safety and help them keep them alive. I mean, and that ripple effect goes to all the family and the entire community. So that's huge.
And I love that insight, actually. So, and this kind of bleeds into this whole corporate innovation agitator. But I think it's such an important point that innovation in particular, whether it's brought through entrepreneurs or other methods, like, it is a series of small steps that may or may not add up to something big over time. And, in big companies, people get wrapped around the axle on this all the time. Like, they try and envision the solution. They try and figure out everything before they take any action. And you'll never get anything done. And what I love about the entrepreneurs, and this is my agitation with corporate innovation, is just by doing something, you learn something, and then you can iterate, and other people see it and learn something, and you learn and you iterate. And then that's how you actually end up changing the world.
There we go. You have redemption now, Ian. You did it.
Yeah, so I'm guessing one of the objectives in your accelerator is to bring these entrepreneurs in front of people who would fund them or find some avenues for funding. So Rita was mentioning earlier, we typically look 3 different places. We either look for grant money, we look for bank money, or we look for investors. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. It's really good. We live really firmly in the world of venture capital and equity investments. And so, the vast majority of the teams who come to us expect to take kind of this high risk, high return equity capital where their investors are going to expect, in kind of insane, like 3x every year growth trajectory. That's the world we live in. Very few of our founders sort of go for grants. They may use them for supplementary work or go for sort of loan or, collateralized financing, things like that. It's actually an important bit of selection bias because a lot of it's really important early on to prove to yourself as a founding team that sort of capital makes sense to you, right? Because that capital, like every entrepreneur should not be going for venture capital. Like, in fact, I would argue most shouldn't, but that's the world we live in. And so our teams go on and they expect to raise typically what's called a seed round from VC firms, which, can be anywhere from $1 million to $5 million. It kind of varies based on where you are in the world, but it comes with the expectation that you have proven that there is a problem in the world and that you are the team to solve it and that your solution has traction, and you are raising capital to go prove that you can actually win in that market and that you're going to grow 10x, 100x, 1000x. And that's a lot of pressure.
I was just wondering where you sort of fit in that scope of the finance world. And certainly, like you say, it's not for everyone. But it's interesting to hear that this is a place where people can go if they are on that path.
I think we were talking about this a little before the show, but I am a grateful immigrant to the country of Canada. I'm an American originally, but I've seen some of the differences in sort of entrepreneurship. And one of the interesting things is just how much grant funding is available in Canada relative to the US market for entrepreneurs. And from my perspective, where I'm sitting, sort of in this classic VC world as this kind of high risk, high growth capital, that's a blessing, but it's also a curse. And yeah, it's great, right? It gets people started, but it can trap entrepreneurs because sometimes what you're doing is not working. And yet you can string yourself along on grant funding for many, many years. And that, I'm not worried about where that capital is coming from, like in the scheme of taxpayer money and all that, or if it's public, it's pretty limited, but it drains your energy as a human, right? Energy as an entrepreneur should be on the next thing. So there's actually part of the reason we focus on sort of this venture capital and equity capital is because built into that system is a mechanism that very quickly helps you identify if it's not working. And when it's not, that's really painful. And it feels sometimes invalidating as a human, and you've wasted a lot of time and all that. But it also frees you up to go do the next thing before you have the life sucked out of you.
I really, really, really relate to that. I feel like COVID was that agitator and kind of like an accelerator for a lot of us in a life sense, potentially, and potentially also in a business sense. And it really helped us kind of go fast and furious. Yes or no? Is this what we want in life? Is this what we should be doing? Or is this what I thought where I would be? And I feel like, well, I know myself, we made a lot of life decisions that we were so grateful that we did. And it all happened kind of because of this situation. So regardless of if it kind of invalidates the idea, it allows you to progress forward. And I hate the idea of seeing someone just stuck, but you're still getting the funding, but you're actually not living.
COVID did that too, though. COVID provided funding to companies that would otherwise have failed and should have failed. And all it did was prolong the agony. And we watched the fallout of that probably in 2022. We didn't see it when it should have happened in 2020. We delayed the process to 2022. So I agree with you. There are some companies that, and I have a client, and I'll be happy to tell you I'm a Shred practitioner. So I have a client who, if it not for Shred, they would have gone under 20 years ago. And I totally agree with you. They should have gone under 20 years ago.
And 20 years.
Oh, seriously, on the edge for 20 years. I'm saying 20, it's probably 15.
That's a good chunk of a working career.
That is a whole lifetime in a career, really, for a lot of, it's been a startup for that long.
Yeah, that's tough. That's really, really tough. And I think there is something to be said for, having the externalities around you that force these hard conversations. One of these other cool things, Rita, you and I were talking about this, I think, when we met a while ago. But, one of the other values of an accelerator or any other type of cohort-based program is you end up with a peer community kind of going through this intense moment together. Because being an entrepreneur is a lonely road at times. Very lonely road. And, we often talk about these peer communities as being there to support each other and lift each other up, which matters. But you know what else? Sometimes they can be that external voice of honesty, right? Doesn't have to be a COVID or something else. They can be that, you know what? Like, we've built some trust. I see what you're doing. I don't know that it's working. And that can be very powerful. I saw that this morning in one of our cohorts, with some very honest feedback from a founder peer about, I won't go into the details, but when you see that, you're like, oh, that's a pretty powerful moment. And everybody should, if only we were all so lucky as to have that voice of honesty in our lives.
Wow. And maybe whoever they mentioned this to might not have, like you said earlier, didn't appreciate it maybe, or didn't want to be invalidated. But I know for a fact you will appreciate it, because throughout my life, I've had that with some really great, strong people, and it really helped propel me forward and not kind of sink in for longer than I should have, although I still did that as well. But
haven't we all?
Thank God there were some people to pull me out. But that would have been such a powerful moment. How did the other entrepreneur take it? I'm just curious.
Luckily, it was a relatively small matter. It wasn't one of those like rethink my entire life things. But I was impressed. They took it really well, right? It was a critique of a piece of messaging, and it was very blunt, and it was very honest and very true. And they're like, you know what? I hear you. I'm going to go completely rethink this. And that's good. In my experience, people don't usually take it well at first because there's a mourning period. And this could be a small thing, like my boss yells at me for having made a mistake on, a contract or something. Like, I'll probably mourn on that for 20 minutes before I recover. And if it's a big thing, like something you've spent 3 years of your life on or more, or 15 years.
Yeah. Or sometimes they're just ready and waiting for someone to say it and give them permission to say something. I don't know why we're waiting for permission, but that happens a lot. So I wanted to also ask you, we learned a little bit about you, a little bit about Alchemist Accelerator, a little bit about some of the funding and other pieces that you do, but is there kind of a success story or just kind of a way for us to kind of wrap it all up by saying, here's how someone started, and by the time they finished with kind of the program, here's kind of some of the cool results?
I'm happy to talk about some of the incredible companies in our portfolio. Launch Darkly is a really big DevOps company doing some incredible work. There's a whole bunch of smaller ones coming up. But step back and think about what is success. The good thing is it's actually pretty simple. Have you as a founding team developed conviction in the problem that you're trying to solve in the world? You're building a product or a service to solve a problem. Have you developed data-backed conviction, right? Have you built a body of relationships with customers and partners who validate your conviction? So we have people build customer advisory boards. We have people go out and find, it's one of the first things they do is they build a board of advisors of people who would eventually be paying them money, right? Have you done that? Have you gotten traction as measured by revenue, usually users, other things? Like, that's success, because that's your launching point, right? That's what tells you this problem deserves to be solved in the world. Enough people believe in both my solution and my team, and they're kind of one of the same thing at an early stage company, that they're willing to change behavior, allocate money, et cetera. And then the ultimate measurement is, can we go out and raise capital? And I'm really proud of the fact that about half of our companies go on to, raise a significant round of venture capital after graduation. And at the stage we're talking about, right, teams come in with 2 to 5 people, early stage. That's a pretty high success rate. And the ones that don't raise capital, sometimes they just don't need to because they've done very well. But, often it's because they didn't develop that conviction and they're freed up to go do their next thing.
And how long is the accelerator program?
Our program's 6 months, and we run 3 of them per year. So they overlap, which is actually kind of cool because you have the rising class learning from the one about to graduate. But it's longer than most. A lot of these programs out there are 12 weeks. That's sort of a classic And ours is longer for one really simple reason. We work with enterprise tech companies, and the enterprise sales cycle is lengthy. I could use other words, but I'll just stick with lengthy.
I like that. We're being cautious with our words today for some reason. Need to get a little tougher here. Maybe we will. So right about now is when we kind of go into what we call a quick fire around the table, and we just kind of go through and say, perhaps there's an aha moment or something that really resonated with me. Or maybe there's another question that, we want to ask Ian, or Ian wants to ask us. Instead of me choosing someone, is there anyone that wants to go first? We're being really nice today.
Yeah. I'll go first.
Let's argue.
Yeah. Let's duke it out. No, it's Ian.
I was just going to bring up, you were talking about that situation where somebody comes up with a big idea and or not necessarily a big idea, but maybe just a small idea, and they don't understand the ripple of what that change might make. And having made a lot of changes in our firm this year, I understand that excitement. So when you were talking about that, I was like, that entrepreneur feeling. Yeah. So that resonated with me today. So it must be exciting to go see that over and over and over again. So
it must be an awesome and super dynamic, day that you have every single day with all these different entrepreneurs. It must be so fascinating. Peggy, I'll jump over to you.
How do I know I'm an entrepreneur that should talk to Ian, that should come to you? How do I know how to start?
That was my question. Now we'll fight. Just kidding. Can I talk to Ian?
What a good question. How do I know I'm an entrepreneur? I mean, it's okay.
I know I'm an entrepreneur, but how do I know I have anything that would interest you?
And vice versa. That's what matters, right? It's okay. So look, how do you know? I am a builder. I'm a technical person building something that I plan to sell to enterprises. Right there, that narrows your set pretty tightly. We're one of the leading programs for sort of enterprise accelerators. If you're building an enterprise tech and you want that network, you should talk to us. But the other thing, how you know that you should talk to us is when you also know what you want from an accelerator or what you want from Alchemist, right? Because this is not a one-way street. Founders should only come to us when Alchemist can deliver outsized value to them. And often that is one simple thing. I am deeply, deeply passionate about this thing. I see this thing and I can't get other people to buy into my belief. That is the sort of thing that we really try and help with, because there are methods, there are tools. So if you're in those shoes as an entrepreneur and you're operating the tech space, come talk to us. And not just us. It's like a university. You should talk to a bunch of folks. You do your due diligence. I love that question. Thank you. I hadn't thought about that before.
That was such a good question, Peggy. Thanks.
I got a second one if you need a second one. We talk about enterprise. Define for me, who doesn't know much about anything, I'm just saying that so that our audience can get an understanding. We talk about enterprise as if everyone understands exactly what you're referring to. So let's just make that very clear.
Large organizations, public or private, Pepsi, GM, your local hospital system, municipal governments, large organizations, which is typically very distinct from consumers, something being sold to an individual. It's really who's writing the check. Facebook is a consumer tech, even though it monetizes through enterprise, right? Consumer packaged goods, consumers.
Now I can ask all the questions that have been asked. I guess my question, Ian, is for your side. Actually, I'm going to take a step back. I want to say thank you. Thank you for all the insights and some good laughs, but thanks for helping break down this understanding, because I don't know if everyone has the understanding of what is an accelerator. And, let me just jump into one because I think it'll help me. But I think it's really important, just like everything else, is you've got to figure out if this is a match for you, and it goes back and forth. That I think is a really good key point that you brought across. But I guess my question to you is, Ian, what's next for you? I mean, we've got all of this, but you've done so much. Are we going to continue with Alchemist? I know this is maybe it's bad, but I'm kind of curious. I feel with all of this awesome entrepreneurial vibes and energy around you, how can you not, start thinking and or considering other entrepreneurial ventures, right? Like, I mean,
yeah, if it wasn't clear from like my personal little monologue, I'm not a planner, so I can legitimately say I have no idea what's next. I've never in my life like been able to think more than like, 4 weeks ahead. But I love the question because here's what gets me excited. I'm seeing agreement here.
I know I resemble many of those remarks, except I was good at linear algebra.
Fair enough. Can I just say, like, I was having a conversation with a kid. I'm going to call him a kid. He's like 25 or something, but like I'm old now. I was having a conversation with a kid about his future career the other day, and like it was a mentorship meeting. Like he just wanted to chat, and I'm glad he reached out. But like he had planned the next 20 years of his life, and I was sitting there. I was like, more power to you. Like honestly, if that's what drives you and motivates you, that's great. It's so the opposite of me. I felt like I couldn't help. What I didn't mention is the degrees I actually have are in politics and French, and I've never worked in politics. I unfortunately have forgotten all my French, but like I am fascinated by how the world changes and people change and how they interact with each other. There's a bunch of things happening in the world that to me mean that we're just at the starting phase of kind of a new golden age of entrepreneurship. Like people have been entrepreneurs forever and people are entrepreneurs everywhere. It's innate to humanity. But when I think about what's actually happening, the pace of change in technology, AI is a canonical example. It's faster than anybody in the world can keep up with. The democratization of the tools are incredible. A single person can go build things that were unimaginable for a team to build 10 years ago with $5 million. And the way that's spreading around the world, unfortunately, we're living in a world that is actually becoming increasingly fractured, which is sad in many ways. But it means that it's harder to sort of get access to the methods and the tools in different places around the world than it might have been. So all this is coming together. And where I'm going with this is like, I think we're at the precipice of a new wave of tech entrepreneurship that are, millions of people around the world. And so when we think about what's next at Alchemist, when I think about what's next for me, I'm really excited about bringing that not just to the entrepreneurs that I work with in North America, because I live here, but we're spending a lot more time overseas. When you look at the data, the success rate of startups formed outside of North America relative to North America is abysmal, right? They fail at a much higher rate. They grow much smaller. I think that's going to change. And so I am spending a lot of time looking to the Far East, to Japan, looking to the Gulf region and the Middle East and to other regions around the world to say, how do we get in and set those entrepreneurs up for success given the new tools they have? Oh, so long answer, but like that I find really cool.
Would this be linked to the productivity crisis that is all the rage in the news these days, do you feel?
Probably. Tell me about the productivity crisis. Like, what do you mean by that?
I've seen several news stories that we have this productivity crisis in Canada and North America, actually, and the States were just not as productive as we used to be. And yeah.
Oh, it's okay. So this is where I'm not an expert on that, but here's what I can say. Like my anecdotal observation is that I don't know about compared to 5 years ago, but relative to the rest of the world, productivity per unit of human capital out of the United States is pretty much unparalleled. And that's a combination of working way too much and having access to technology. There are other places in the world that I think Canada's probably a bit lower, but I don't know that. But here's what is related to the productivity crisis. Tech is changing what people can do at a faster rate than any of us can keep up with. And it is going to be scary for a while. Humans are going to lose their jobs. The flip side of that is they're going to be able to do a lot more with their same product, the same tools. So I think we are setting ourselves up for a very turbulent time because of the pace of advancements of technology. While we figure out as society and as individuals how to get to the next level of productivity increase. Every technology revolution that we know about in the past has led to a significant increase in per capita productivity in the past. I think that will happen again, but I think we are in the phases of, we're at the beginning of a very turbulent era of figuring out what that looks like. And yes, like productivity might dip. Different countries are going to deal with it differently, depending on protectionism versus not, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. That's not very specific. I don't know if you agree with me, but that's what I see. Yeah. I'm kind of nervous, to be honest.
That's a whole new podcast. I mean, I think that's a perfect way to end off, but I am quite concerned just in so many respects. I think, yeah, we're saying it. And the next one specifically focused on this topic. We'll go all in, right, guys?
Let's do it.
But for now, I just wanted to just say, like, wow, with all these different thoughts and this last, like, these insights, where I guess we're kind of coming to a close, even though I don't want to close. And so I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today and listening in. And on behalf of Peggy and Candace, Ian, Alchemist Accelerator, and myself, Rita Kim, we hope that this episode has kind of given you a little bit of a deeper understanding of accelerators, perhaps how they support not just, the people going in, but the rest of the entrepreneur ecosystem as well. And I just wanted, I think it just all about fostering collaboration, but also understanding who you are. And when it's time to take that plunge. I know if you want to get a hold of Ian, he'll be happy to share his email and his phone number directly with us. And we're happy to pass that around. He's laughing right now. You can't see us. But again, on a final note, thank you again for listening. And please share this episode with some entrepreneurs that may benefit from this. And as always, we hope that this episode has brought you some serenity now. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and picked up some good tips and best practices that would benefit your entrepreneurial journey. Remember, none of the content in this podcast should be relied upon as standard legal or business advice. Always consult a professional for your specific business. You may know someone who could benefit from this podcast. Please share it with your business community, and perhaps it can give an entrepreneur some serenity now.